Mage Storytime, Episode 10, Dark Corners and Bright Colors. This is the continuing story of the Iron Goldfish, a party of role-players who awakened as mages. Our cast includes Alwi, who manipulates time with his phone; Bard, a mind and spirit mage who uses superheroes as his gods; Critical, who improves the luck of others through his own pain; Handy, a correspondence-using thief who steals items at long range; Kitty, who empowered his stickers and cats with spirits; Tello, a postmodern mage who uses a hodgepodge of skills to manipulate forces and matter; and Weeb, who uses his life skills to enhance his martial arts and Chinese medicine. Things continued roughly the same for our party of mages. The store still suffered under a financial attack from the technocracy, while we dug into all of the lore we could find, trying to find a good way to combat the Bane spirits in the mall and capture the node. In pursuit of that end, we were doing our best to win friends and influence people in the supernatural community. We had had fairly good success thus far, and several of our party members were learning more and more in their respective traditions. The research was also why Weeb, Alwi, and Talo couldn't make it to our regular meeting that week, as they were doing their best to learn all they could. At least, that's what they said. Bard submitted that they were just a bunch of lazy bastards who didn't want to help around the shop. Plus, they might have been afraid of getting attacked by another car monster, which was a legitimate concern. So it was that only Critical, Bard, Kitty, and Handy were around to find the letter that came in. It claimed to be from someone named Lord Archeon, and in the name of something called the Glastonbury Compact, commanded the Iron Goldfish to appear at the address provided immediately. We had nothing better to do, and we didn't want to aggravate anybody that was considered a lord of anything, so we decided to show. It seemed a better idea than trying to take on the Bane spirits in the mall with half our party missing, at any rate. It was a bit odd when we arrived at a hospital in the medical district near downtown Dallas. It was one of the nicer, more expensive facilities, but the cost of the place didn't assuage our nervousness when we realized the person we were coming to see was a patient in the psychiatric ward. We decided to be on our best behavior, as engaging in our normal style of screwing around here might get us locked away. After emptying our pockets of contraband and potentially hazardous material, we were allowed through the security doors and entered a large open meeting room. Round tables were scattered around the room, with little groups of patients and visitors sitting at them carrying on quiet conversations. One side of the large space included recreation equipment, board games, books, and other entertainment. We were taken to a patient whose name tag read Archie Leon, and the nurses gave us our privacy. The supposed lord was pleased to see us, bowing politely and gesturing expansively towards the seats. Critical noticed one of the nurses tense slightly, and he decided to press his luck by bowing back. The lord's smile widened, while the nurse's frown deepened. To keep track of the proceedings for our absent teammates, Critical spontaneously decided to keep notes of our interactions with this character. This would later turn out to be a good decision. Archie asked us of what we knew of a group called Clan Tremere, and it was up to Handy to provide exposition for the rest of us. In brief, many centuries ago, a group of sorcerers in the Order of Hermes realized that they couldn't live forever, and decided on a shortcut to immortality. They betrayed the Order and became vampires, learned how to do magic in a new and brutal form with blood rites, and the two organizations had been at war ever since. They were one of the most powerful groups in vampire society, and were extremely dangerous. The Lord informed us that they had been full wizards, despite the Order's propaganda, but that was essentially correct. He also said that they were a particular thorn in his side, and had been a danger to his people of late. This prompted the obvious question as to who his people were, and for that matter, who he was. "Why, I'm Lord Archeon, one of the High Lords of the Sidhe." When that only drew blank looks, he elaborated. "The Fae, the fair folk, the summer kin, you know, fairies. And if one of you fools even mentions the word glitter, you're in for a world of hurt. I thought you knew who I was. But as I said, the Tremere have been attacking my people in the region. They're the reason I've had to take refuge here, though I've found the place entertaining. I'm given to understand that our blood is a powerful and addictive hallucinogen for vampires, but they might also be using it as a magical ingredient. Either way, I am calling upon you, in the name of the Glastonbury Compact, to help me get rid of them." We weren't sure about the truth of what the man said, until he made a small gesture with his hand. From out of nowhere, a hot wind whipped up and swirled around Archeon, catching his clothes and hair and providing a dazzling display of power. After that, it never even occurred to us to ask what the Glastonbury Compact was. Once he had proven his supernatural bona fides, we were pretty much on board. It never does to offend powerful people, especially if they were fairy lords. On that note, we began talking to the Fae about magic and how we might learn to do the same thing. We were told that we couldn't learn his type of magic. In fact, because of the way reality worked, we wouldn't even remember that he had done any magic. Even other supernatural creatures, normally immune to the mystical veils that hide the magical world from mortal eyes, could not see through the mists that occluded Fae magic. The only reasons we would remember that part of the conversation at all was because Critical had been taking notes. It wasn't foreknowledge on Critical's part. He just got lucky, once again living up to his nickname. That was also why no one had seemed to pay any attention to the magic going on in their presence. Because of some mystical, psychological doohickey, they couldn't even register that magic was going on right in front of them. Setting that aside as just another weird magic thing, we began to focus on the case before us. It turned out 3 Fae had been attacked in recent weeks, being found dead on the street with most or all of their blood drained. One had been found outside his job, another outside their apartment, and one in an alley outside a club where she had been dancing. All were in a region of Dallas near the downtown/uptown area known as the Gayborhood. And before you make any tasteless jokes, one flip comment about fairies in the Gayborhood will result in your bone marrow being replaced with molten brass. We congregate there because a lot of the area is bright and colorful and welcoming of odd, some might say Fae, individuals. But like any hunting trip, you could follow the predator or the prey. Look for places vampires might congregate, where it's dark and gloomy, or some place where the prey, Fae, might gather. Bright, happy places with a lot of creativity and childlike wonder. Legoland, theme parks, anything like that would be a good candidate for my people. That's all the advice I can give you, but when you've found your quarry, give me a call and I can arrange for some of my people to support you in the battle. Without much more ado, especially since visiting hours were ending, we left the Fey Lord to his puzzles and coloring books and turned to our hunt. When we arrived on the street, we were confused as to why we had given the crazy man the time of day, especially when he claimed to be a fairy. Then we read Critical's notes, especially the part about seeing the magic and the part about how we would forget the magic, and a chill ran up all of us. We decided to be quick about things, so as not to give offense to this powerful creature. Still, we had lost some sense of the urgency, having forgotten about the impressive magical display, and we thought it would be wise to gather some more allies if we were going to face any vampires, especially without half our crew. Plus, if you're hunting vampires, and don't already know where their lair is, you kind of need to wait until after dark. With that in mind, we made a detour to the South Dallas Cemetery where we knew the last group of Hollow Ones gathered. It was later at night when we got there, nearing midnight, which seemed an appropriate time to visit a graveyard. We pulled into the fenced-off cemetery and drove for a few minutes trying to find the mages. They were gathered towards the rear, a couple standing together and watching as another man danced. All 3 were black, and the dancing man was dressed in a nice suit with a sash and peaked hat. He was dancing to what we guessed was some sort of African music. We were all too American, or white, to be able to identify it more precisely. And he seemed to be really getting into the music. On the hood of a nearby car, a cigar smoldered in an ashtray next to a bottle of rum. Kitty, being the most interested in the sphere of entropy and its relation to death magic, was the first to approach. He strolled up through the moonlit headstones and waved as he approached. He came up to the dancing man and said, "Wow, those are some great moves. You must really be into art." The dancer was immediately on guard and seemed unwilling to acknowledge what we thought was the mage code word. Apparently it works better with some groups than with others. Kitty kept on, though, mentioning our recent bat problem. This got the Hollow One's attention, and when they pressed, Kitty admitted that he was talking about vampires. The dancer responded that walking up to a bunch of strangers in the middle of a cemetery at midnight while your buddies waited in the shadows was exactly the sort of thing a vampire hit squad might do. We didn't have an answer for this, but as Kitty stood there hemming and hawing, he radiated an awkwardness that left him seeming harmless. The man had a panda-ish quality about him at times, and for once his lack of intimidation factor worked to our benefit. The dancer admitted that we probably weren't vampire assassins, and offered Kitty his hand to shake. When our party member took the offered appendage, the dancer just held his hand for a few seconds, and then declared him clean. When Kitty asked what he meant, the man held up his palm, on which was tattooed a stylized gravestone. "True faith. I touched you with the symbol of my god, and you didn't burn. You're no vampire." Kitty pulled out a notebook and started to copy the image, but was told it would only work for someone with true faith. The cross or Star of David wasn't what hurt the vampires, it was the faith of the wielder. A disappointed Kitty put away his notebook and waved the rest of the party over. Introductions were made all around, and the group of mages identified themselves as Voodoo gangsters. They incorporated voodoo and spirit traditions with a Robin Hood/Bonnie and Clyde lifestyle. Spirit riding and helping the community were apparently their primary goals. As we were having this discussion, we noticed a fourth man arrive. He strode in through the lines of gravestones, the moonlight glittering off his black skin. He had a black suit and top hat, and half of his face was painted as a skull. As we stared silently, he walked straight into the back of the dancer and merged with him. The top hat transferred to the mage's head, and he picked up the cigar and took a puff. A disconcerted bard, who had a background in religious studies, asked the man if he might be the Baron. "Why, yes, I am Baron Samedi. I'm so pleased you recognized me. Oh, it's nice to be in a body again. Say what you will about the spirit world, but the booze doesn't get you drunk." So saying, he took a giant swig of the rum and chuckled again. Bard asked for an autograph and to have the honor of sharing a drink with such a renowned Loa. The Baron laughed again and poured around for everyone in the shot glasses he pulled from thin air. The Baron was perhaps, if not necessarily the friendliest spirit we had dealt with, at least the most relaxed to talk to. We spent some time talking about the vagaries of vampires and werewolves and the problem of technocratic mages. The Baron was full of advice, but most of it boiled down to bury them alive or turn them into zombies. Those weren't especially operable ideas for us, yet, but we appreciated the divine input nonetheless. We shared a few more rounds, and Kitty asked the Baron what it would take to become a true believer in him. It was easy to have the faith in a god when he showed up and shared a drink with you. Baron Samedi was more amused than anything, but he said that true faith often had to be in the unseen to work properly. Believing in a god you shook hands with was kind of like believing in the mailman. But he would be happy to have a new follower, and so after some more talk, Kitty gained the Baron as a new and potent ally. All it took to appease him was a glass of rum and a cigar. Or, in a pinch, any liquor and some tobacco or weed. To summon him, Kitty only needed to draw an image of the Baron's gravestone symbol and drop it in some grave dirt. Pleased to know he could contact his new friend with ease, Kitty made his goodbyes and the rest of us did likewise. We left amazed at how much progress we had made without half the party. Perhaps that said something about our missing members, but we decided not to follow that line of thought. Having gained new allies, both mortal and divine, we returned to Dallas with fresh confidence. It was decided that waiting until the next day to begin our search would be wise, and it isn't smart to hunt vampires at night. You might find them. Friday afternoon, we began our search at the club where the female body had been found. We figured that victim had the most potential witnesses and was also the place we could access easiest. No secretarial staff or door security to make our way past, so long as we went before they got too busy. We walked right into the gay bar, made only mildly uncomfortable by the acres of male flesh on display. It had nothing to do with our sexuality, and everything to do with how very ripped all these guys were. One glance down at our own flabby selves and our self-esteem was brutally crippled. Still, we soldiered on and walked over to the bar. We chose one bartender in particular to talk to, as a quick glance with Critical's prime and spirit senses showed a pair of large rabbit ears sticking out of his head. Critical was worried that it might be Coyote for a moment, but we figured this guy was probably another Fae. Or a furry, but that was a risk we would have to take. While we ordered a drink and waited for the bartender, we tried to brainstorm ways to handle the vampires. Sunlight and fire were classic answers. but a chainsaw or bazooka also sounded pleasant. Handy figured he could use his magic to reverse pickpocket one of the vamps and stake them that way. It was brought up that staking someone through the pocket was not particularly effective, unless you got them right in the crotch, but that was only likely to piss off a vampire. The plan was revised to reverse pickpocketing a grenade into a vampire's pocket, which we all thought would have much more satisfying results. Finally, the bartender finished what he was doing and came back over to us to chat. We mentioned that he seemed a little more special than normal, but he was cagey about his responses until Critical flat out mentioned the rabbit ears. "Oh, wow, just shout it right out. Okay, how can I help you, unsubtle people who are endangering my existence?" "A certain person named Archie Leon," at that the Bunny Ears bartender flinched, "has tasked us with dealing with a certain group of vampires, and we could use your assistance." Hearing that we were there to deal with the vampire issue, the bartender was visibly relieved, and said it was about time. He was happy to tell us everything he knew, which wasn't a whole lot. He knew one of the two men who had been killed, but had only heard about their deaths secondhand. The only one he really knew much about was the girl, Jessie, who had been partying in the club on the night she disappeared. She had been dancing with a group of normal-looking individuals, 2 men and a woman, and ultimately left with them. That was the last anyone had seen her alive, so far as the bartender knew. He hadn't seen the group before, but he didn't think the people were vampires. They didn't seem especially banal, which he explained was the Fey term for the anti-dream force that constrained them. Vampires created banality, and any changeling like him would have noticed their presence. Our last question had to do with new businesses in the neighborhood, thinking that the vampires might have a front operation similar to what we did. The area was pretty heavily populated with independent retailers and small shops, so while there were certainly new businesses, he really didn't know of anything that stood out. The only thing he could think of was the new International Bank building that had just been completed. That was probably the biggest single new operation, but there were, no doubt, plenty more places to choose from. Still, lacking any better leads and being well out of our depth as investigators, we decided the bank was the best place to start. Standing in the lobby, we began to whisper in hushed tones about international conspiracies, banking cartels, and the sinister vampire cults that must be secretly running the world. Then Bard, who was scanning the building's directory posted on the wall, pointed to Trim Consulting Co. We all felt a bit let down and were none too happy with the silly state of reality. Still, we shrugged and rationalized that immortal vampires probably tended to be arrogant and thought no one would catch them, or that they could just eat them if they did. A quick Google search had told us the company did financial consulting, which we, as a floundering new business, could actually use. So we took the elevator to the top floor, where the consulting company's office was housed, and walked through the glass doors. The female receptionist who greeted us was all polite cheer. She asked us how she could help, and we spun her a tale of financial woe and bureaucratic chicanery. She was suitably aggrieved and said that we were just the sort of people their company was designed to assist. While we were carrying on the conversation, all of us were surreptitiously using our magical senses to try to discover cold bodies, beastly soul tumors, or any other sign of vampirism. Unfortunately, or fortunately given our relative squishiness, both she and the one office worker we saw walking by registered as regular, unawakened humans. She did say, however, that we would have to make an appointment to speak to the actual counselors. They did the majority of their work with European and East Asian companies, and thus tended to work in the middle of the night local time. This seemed like a promising lead, so we made an appointment for the next week to meet them. That way, we would be able to have our full strength. And if they weren't vampires, we could get some mundane business help. Win-win, except for the part where we might have to fight vampires. But that was a problem for future us. We left the bank and split up for the week, rejoicing in our ability to have 3 whole conversations without anyone trying to kill us. A new record. What will happen with the vampires? Will the Iron Goldfish make some more new friends? Or will the return of their teammates screw it all up again? Find out on the next Mage Storytime.